continue to join us. And that is great. You are all very welcome. We just want to take a moment for some gratitudes to get us started, to ground us in the fact that none of us are here by our own accord or alone or without others. And healing solidarity is no different. Sarah, if you could move us to slide 2, I want to say thank you to all of our members who sustain us throughout the year. And anyone who wants to join us is welcome to follow that link. And we've got some amazing institutional supporters this year as well. The Oxfam US Aid Effectiveness Team, Power, Equality Fund, Libra Foundation, and Firelight. Really, really grateful to them and to all of you for being here today. And if we can go off screen now. I want to share a little bit with all of you about how and why Healing Solidarity even began. In 2018, Marianne Clements, who you'll hear from today, had this crazy idea to have an online conference where we talked about our sector and what needs to happen differently, and how we can reimagine what it could even look like or feel like or be like. And from that conference, we've now had about 3,500 people join us in these conferences each year, join us in our online collective. And we offered that conference in the initial times because, if you recall, Aid 2 had just happened. The Me Too had really revealed itself also as part of our sector of international aid and philanthropy. And then in the last year, not only have we had a global uprising for Black Lives Matter, but we've had the COVID pandemic. So the urgency of our work together to think differently and to act differently is really present. And that's why we continue to meet. I will, you got the message, this is being recorded. So I just want to take a moment and offer that awareness to all of us as we begin. I will explain how today's format will work. It will be different than most of your online conferences you now experience. So just get ready, start to close the other tabs, start to be here in this moment with us together, which is what the new world requires. It requires our presence. It requires our ability to stay with the hard stuff. It really requires we stop being so damn distracted when everything is trying to distract us. So that's part of the energy and the spirit which we invite you into in this session today. If any of you need or want to be anonymous, we have the capacity to help that come into fruition. So just message me and I can let you know how that can work. But that's part of our offering as well. So when we started talking about the conference this year, we thought, everybody is doing online conferences. Where is the sector right now? What is actually needed for where we are? And at Healing Solidarity, what we're always trying to do is to recognize that we have an opportunity, and I would say even an obligation, to concretize in practice our notions of care and consent. And this is really about fundamentally shifting the way our sector operates, our organizational cultures, our ways of being and working together. And then to really offer up what are some new models of leadership? What does this actually look like? Because we recognize that it is individual actions within complex systems that help usher in this new way of being in the world. So with that, I will ask us all to center, to take a moment and arrive. And I'm going to ask Each of you, if you'd be willing to close your eyes. If it's comfortable for you, you can turn off your camera, but we want to take a moment to center, to ground, to remember why any of us are here in this moment, which is to be together. So I invite you to close your eyes. I invite you to be conscious of your breath as it enters your nose and fills your lungs. Its entry and its exit. I invite you to take a deep breath because it can remind you of your aliveness. And it can remind us of our connectedness to our bodies, to each other, and to the land that holds us. We take a deep breath in recognition of the hard work you've done, in recognition of the joy that is there for all of us. I invite you to take a deep breath because you are here and you are welcome and you are needed. And I'm going to offer this poem from Ben Okri to begin. And as I read, I just invite you to keep listening to your breath, to your inner knowing, to your greater intuition, to your sense of the space you're in, emotionally, physically, spiritually. This is from Turn On Your Light, from Mental Fight, an anti-spell for the 21st century. The new era is already here. Here the new time begins anew. A new era happens every day is a new world, a new calendar. All great moments, all great eras are just every moment, and every day writ large. Thousands of years of loving, failing, killing, creating, surprising, oppressing, and thinking ought now to start to bear fruit, to deliver their rich harvest. Will you be at the harvest among the gatherers of new fruits? Then you must begin today to remake your mental and spiritual world and join the warriors and celebrants of freedom, realizers of great dreams. You can't remake the world without remaking yourself. Each new era begins within. It is an inward event with unsuspected possibilities for inner liberation. We could use it to turn on our inward lights. We could use it to use even the dark and negative things positively. We could use the new era to clean our eyes, to see the world differently, to see ourselves more clearly. Only free people can make a free world, infect the world with your light, help fulfill golden prophecies. Press forward the human genius. Our future is greater than our past. Welcome all. As I said, we're really glad you're here. We're glad to be having these conversations with you. And we're here excited to think about making different choices. So I want to start by just, I will soon introduce and welcome all of the amazing conversation catalysts that will be joining me today. But we are experimenting. We're here to invite you into the experiment. One of the skills that we have to build in our organizations is the willingness to try out new things, the capacity to say, let's throw that idea out the window and start anew. As I mentioned, everyone is having online conferences now. So one of the things we talked about is that these are really flat experiences. People are passively learning and listening if they're learning. And we're so tempted to check our email while we're listening. Some of you might be doing it right now. But what that amounts to is that none of us are really present online with each other. And so much of that notion of presentation at a conference reinforces those notions of who's the expert and who's not. We want to blast that all apart. We actually want to invite you to practice together in this time and make visible what it means to nurture relationships and dialogue and trust, and how knowledge actually can emerge from those processes that are labeled emergent, or that are really, I would always say when I worked in big organizations, the water cooler was the best place to make any change. It's because people had let their guards down. It's because they were ready to be in dialogue about what the real problems were. So as Healing Solidarity, that's part of what we want to bring today. We don't actually know what's going to happen. We have prepared, but the plan is to let you all join in this conversation, to actually create the conditions where each of you get to be a part of this, not as a passive participant, but as someone who has an important role in whatever space and organization and city or town you live in. We all of us need to be here, part of this. So we're going to invite that in. We don't know what's going to happen because we are actively trying to build our tolerance for not knowing, for not holding on to the outcomes so tightly, right? For not being so goal linear determinant. We're trying to really expand what it means to be together as professionals so that we can not bring all our trauma to table and just make conflict happen. We're here so that in this conversation with each other, we're weaving a collective thread. We're actually sparking new ideas with each other, and we're teasing out new practices. Every one of you are being asked at this time, with the awareness that you have, to make different choices, to reshape what this do-gooder thing is. So let's go. Let's just see what happens today. We're really glad you're here. We will ask people to just bear with us. There might be some technical glitches in the not knowing, but what we're hoping today is to give you an experience that enriches your sense of what you can do and leaves you feeling hopeful and inspired and with real practical ideas for how to take the work forward. So Sarah, if you could spotlight all the folks who will be part of our first fishbowl this morning, that would be great. And then I'm going to explain how it all works and how you all can join in the conversation. Here we go. All right. You all are looking at the fishbowl. For those of you who have experienced a fishbowl in real life, I'll explain a little bit more about how this will work. But the idea is that these 4 little boxes is our inner circle. There will always be 4 people in the mix of that more focused conversation, but it is a conversation we're trying to bring. This is, as I said, this is not a presentation. This is a dialogue. So I will share that all of these beautiful, amazing humans who are in the fishbowl right now are my fellow advisory board members of Healing Solidarity. We're going to kick off this conversation today, but we're really here to invite you all in, as I said. And the only guidance that they were offered is, show up as the person you are and say what comes to you. That's all they've prepared. That's it. And we've given this instructions to all of our conversation catalysts in this session each week. And that's the invitation we're giving to you right now. Show up as the person you are and say what comes to you. So you all have an opportunity to jump into this inner circle, these 4 boxes, and just contribute to the conversation. And actually, we need you to. In order for this conversation to work, we actually need you to come off camera and say the thing and join in with us. So that's our biggest invitation to you. So basically, let me break down what a fishbowl is. And if we were in real life, there'd be a small circle of chairs where people would kick off the conversation and the rest of us would be around them. When those of us who are observing and listening around them want to come in to the inner circle and offer our thoughts, we would tap someone on the shoulder and they would give their chair to us. So when you are ready to take one of these spots in the chat, and we'll all be monitoring the chat, we're just going to ask you to write tap, tap, T-A-P, T-A-P. And that will let us know that you want to be spotlighted. You want to join in this. You don't have to be on camera, but we would love to hear your voice. If that's still not part of how you want to participate, you can also chat to me or Sarah, our amazing tech guru, who if you can wave, Sarah, thank you. Big gratitude to you. But the whole idea is that this is, we're going in and out. So these 3 people and myself will not always be here. You all will be part of this inner circle too, if it all goes well. So these folks that you're seeing now, they have not been told to present anything. I can't emphasize this enough. We're not here to be the experts today. They're focused on the questions they're bringing to all of you and the conversations we build and the experience we share inside the fishbowl. So every one of you is part of that conversation, and observe, listen, of course, but formulate your own thoughts, your own insights, your own questions, and we invite you to offer them into that. So imagine there's always kind of an empty chair there, and with that, those magic 2 words, tap, tap, you get to enter in as well and offer your thoughts. So 4 people will always be spotlighted here or pinned here. As someone comes in, one of us will go out, but all of our conversation catalysts can also tap, tap back in. The dynamicism is what we're really aiming for here. If there's any questions, please get in touch with me or Sarah. But that's the idea. We're really kind of inviting people into it. You'll be added to the queue. You'll get a spotlight. And the other thing I'll say is sometimes we don't have to always say something. Sometimes we can just let something profound sit and be. So we're also experimenting with silence, with like what needs to come into the moment and what insights need to arrive is what we're here to wait for, what we're here to hear and receive from all of you. So as I said, we need you for this to work. So don't leave us hanging. We really don't want this to be like your other online conferences. And then I'll just say, before we get started, we do have a little bit of invitation for you about how to participate today. We call this the Healing Solidarity Invitations. We are here to learn and not critique. We all have something to gain from interacting with each other. I think that we really are trained in our academic lives to pick the thing apart, right? And to find the holes and the problems. We're not doing that. We're here to find what's whole. We're here to find what is shared. We're here to make space for something new to emerge. This is a brave space, but we cannot promise it will be safe. We don't want to say that. We want to invite people to be willing to be challenged and pushed outside their comfort zones. That's actually a value that we hold. So as I mentioned, and as we've tried to model, we're really trying to operate by consent. So invitation and permission is always what we want to do. Just consider this invitation, every invitation you get to opt out. That's the premise of consent. No is possible, but yes is enthusiastically received. Okay. When you speak, and we really hope that you do, please speak from the place of I, not we. That's an important housekeeping part of this for us, because we're here in recognition that while we have common interests, we do not all have a universal lived experience. You are not authorized to speak of we in this moment, but our sector loves a rhetorical we, don't we? We will make a difference. We will fight injustice. Okay, great. But we have differences and we're not trying to erase those today. And finally, and most importantly, just dare to be unprepared. Say what you gotta say. Our value is always for progress, not perfection. And when we measure, and if we listen to respond, we're not really in the moment. So let's just invite ourselves to be imperfect and authentic in this moment. All right. That's all the housekeeping. I hope it's really clear as we enter into the experiment. But I'm so glad and grateful to have my colleagues here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, locate where they are for us, and just offer a little bit of how they're relating to this notion of making different choices.
So, hi everybody, I am Pontso. I am so happy and anticipatory about what we are going to do in this time together. I'm feeling a real connection to some of the names that I've seen coming up who I perhaps haven't spoken to for years, but also some of the new names. Just really looking forward to spending this time with you. I'm physically in London. I'm spiritually always somewhere else. Next week, I'll be physically in Ghana, but also spiritually all over the world. So that's a little bit about me. I work for the African Women's Development Fund, and really happy to be here. And I will pass the metaphorical baton to one of my colleagues.
Hi everyone, I'm Roshni. I'm based in Mumbai, India, where we have a very cool evening all of a sudden after a very hot day, so we're happy about it. I am part of the advisory circle of Healing Solidarity for the last year and a half, I think, and it's been, I think, one of the highlights for me in a very safe grounding space throughout the entire pandemic with wonderful people part of the circle, and also recognize a few names, not too many, and I recognize a few names from our first session today. So thank you for coming back and joining us for this session, and thank you for trusting in us to be here and work with us through this new experiment, and which is also about making new choices. I work with a grassroots organization called Yuva. We work on different issues of human rights, urbanization with women, children, and young people. And yeah, just like Jennifer said, I think I'm also daring to be unprepared and be with all of you today. So share this space. So thanks. And I'll pass on.
Hi everyone. So I'm Marianne in London, in the UK. Yeah, where the sun's come out again. So that's nice. I'm currently the Chief Transformation Officer, which is interim CEO at ADD International, and an advisory circle member with all of these other people in this fishbowl of Healing Solidarity, amongst many other things in my life. Yeah, and so really excited that we're doing this differently this year. We've always recorded conversations before, but this feels really juicy. So excited to dive in and really have a conversation. And I think maybe I'll start by saying like this idea kind of came out of our practice as well, as the advisory circle, because one of the things we've been doing a lot together for the last, I think it's nearly 2 years now, is having conversations like this, where we just let the conversation flow and we explore different issues together. And so I think we're kind of bringing our practice to you in this fishbowl and hoping to kind of invite you into it in a way as well. And I think obviously that's a different choice for the conference. But what I love about it is that I think it's in those what seemed like maybe quite small different choices. Like we could have recorded this last week and played it back to you. And like we could have thought it would be almost the same. And maybe in a way we could have maybe even said the same things, but it's not the same. And I think that's for me is like, it's not the same because you wouldn't have got to be here and jump in and let's see how that goes, right? But I think that, yeah, that for me is a real sort of thread of this. It's like, we have to do the things that seem simple differently, as well as the things that seem big. Sometimes it's really easy, I think, for us in our sets to be like, I can see this whole thing needs to change. It doesn't quite work and it doesn't feel quite right. And we've got to do it differently and it's inequitable and all the things that we know that, you know, many of us have been saying and thinking and hearing and discussing for ages. But actually those small things have to be different too. The thing you do every morning when you start your day, the thing you say, the thing you don't, you know, and it's for me as much as anyone else, that reminder in this. Yeah. I'm in.
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear from Pontso and Roshni how you're relating to making different choices. What does that theme this year mean to both of you?
I was in Steph's session just earlier, and she gave us a free writing prompt on really going back to the erotic and our sensory reactions to prompts like joy and freedom. And the freedom prompt really stayed with me, and I think I spent all my 15 minutes thinking about that. And I think I was linking it to freedom and autonomy and really being in touch with who you are and your own intuition, and was sort of linking it with my own personal life, of course, but also my organizational journey, both in Yuva, but also even earlier. And it was interesting because I usually doodle, especially on online Zoom calls. I do a lot of doodling, and what inevitably happens, I doodle like there's this sort of a bracelet, which is made of either silver or gold or any metal. It's called a kada or a kangan. And I have that doodle, and then that keeps breaking. So I think in my mind, it's symbolic of sort of breaking fetters and shackles. So this whole idea of, and that comes all the time, maybe because I feel bound by these online conversations, but I think that also sort of arose in my mind that, you know, this whole thing of really looking at freedom in organizations and how, as individuals, how can I claim that freedom? Because it's always not given, especially if you're of a certain identity or a certain, you know, age or orientation. And reflecting really on what I have done to maybe claim that freedom. And when I have not been able to do that, those are the situations in which I have really left. I mean, that decision to leave those situations has been easy. That choice has been easy. Maybe that was the right choice, the wrong choice. I don't know. Maybe I should have tried to do more there, but I don't think that's bothering me as much as the fact that having autonomy to be able to do what I want to do, what I intuitively want to do, and why I'm in this sector. I think having that space in an organization is very, very important for me. And that's really what drives me, right from the little things of how I decide to structure my day to what larger issue do I take on because I think it's important. And, you know, as a leader, I feel if that's so important for me, I really feel that is there a way in which I can enable this for others as well? In the way in which our organizations are structured, how do we constantly, what can I do as a leader to enable other people to decide what they want to do, and how they want to approach an issue. And maybe there are, issues along the way, maybe people falter, maybe it doesn't turn out to be the way you started, but how can I really support that journey? And what role do I need to play in that journey? And I think that's been one of my very, very key endeavors, I think, in the current organization I'm in, trying to enable that for as many people as I can. And it's very challenging. And I think I'd really love to hear what some of you also feel in terms of not necessarily going by what a donor wants you to do all the time, not necessarily having the Monday morning weekly meeting every week, and just being okay and trusting your colleagues and your partners that they are doing what they want to do because they're doing it freely, and they will reach out to you when they want to reach out to you, and not having that anxiety that comes from not knowing, or being able to just be free yourself and let others also have that freedom and autonomy. And that's challenging. I mean, I think some places have worked, some places have not worked. So not to take away too much, but I think that's really what to me is about making one of the main choices I think I've been working to do at Yuva has been to, make that sort of enabling that environment. And I do want to leave you all with a song actually, which is a Marathi song. I just sing 2 lines, but it's one of my favorite songs that I learned. I don't know Marathi, but I learned it after joining Yuva. And it's written by a Dalit activist songwriter. And it's in the voice of a woman who's actually moving beyond her, own all the fetters to doing what she wants to do and being who she wants to be. And maybe that will inspire some of you to enter the fishbowl. Samte chavatena, samte chavatena, Khanakavit painzanayava, tu yava, bandhana tori tayava, tu yava, bandhana tori tayava. So yeah, it's about her breaking that and coming along the path of her own freedom. Thanks, Jen.
Wow, that was incredible. I feel I would love Roshni to come and sing me lullabies any time of day. There was something so about not just the beautiful voice, but just the feeling of it. And I think that really it made me think about how I react very instinctively to music, and recognizing the moments in which I feel I'm most centered. For my sins, don't meditate. I probably don't stop enough to think, but feel I respond and react sort of mentally, physiologically, and emotionally to music. And I think what occurred to me is this sense of, I always feel in my professional life that I'm not forced to, but I have to be busy. Things need to get done. And there's this I have this habit of, I have a to-do list, and as I go through the day, I tick things off, and then when they're done, and then it's on to the next one. And I think having joined an organization in the last year, particularly given the context, I've moved my life. It's been in the context of COVID. It's a new organization that is going through a lot of transitions of leadership. Is this sense that it's really rare for us as individuals and in organizations to take a moment to acknowledge. And by acknowledge, it's thinking both of the things that are successes and being very deliberate about celebrating those successes. But I think it's also that sense of, you know, I'm really not a Monday person. You know, I get up on Monday and I know that I have to do work. And I think I always feel a little bit grumpy about it, rather than saying, come at this in a different way, and acknowledging that I'm not a Monday person. I've worked for many years. I won't tell you how many, at the risk of aging myself, but it probably took me the first many years for people to understand that I'm not a morning person. And that the way that I'm able to be the most thoughtful and bring my most bestest is for me to just keep sharing the fact that I can do that in ways that may not be the way they've been done, but that, you know, it's not all centered around what I as Pontso need. So that thing about really meaningfully and deeply acknowledging those differences that we have as individuals in these entities. And I think for me, there's something about, I've worked in some organizations that I would define as machines. We're all bits, we all know exactly what our purpose is, and we do that. And when we're not doing it very well, it's all a little bit needs fixing. As opposed to organizations which I think we aspire and want to see. And, you know, in the African Women's Development Fund is a feminist organization. And for me, there is much more of a sense of an organism where the different organs work together, take care of each other, and make sure that the whole is as healthy as it can be. So for me, that sense of not just thinking in linear straight lines, forget the log frame. I've always hated log frames. If money is dependent on a log frame, I'd rather not, thank you very much. But this sense that we cannot afford not to listen to what we feel and share it and respond to it in a way that works for the whole.
So if our organizations, if we want to look at them as organisms, and we need, first of all, the thing that occurs to me is that organisms die. There is a natural cycle of there's nature, and in nature things come and go. That's like literally one of the things we can't negotiate. It just continues to happen. So I want to acknowledge that some of our organizations maybe shouldn't make it, and take a moment to understand that and find our place for grief for that too. Some of our roles shouldn't continue as they are. Some of our positions shouldn't continue as they are. And it's okay. We can actually acknowledge that. So if our organizations are organisms now, what are the different choices we're making with that awareness? Like in the practical sense, what does that really mean?
For me, there's the whole notion of health in its widest, broadest, most deepest sense. And, you know, going back to that thing of acknowledgement, I know when I have been working too long and sitting in a badly because my shoulder knots up. I've got to listen to that, and I've got to acknowledge it, and I've got to ensure that I take care of it, because if I don't, my neck seizes up, then I can't move my neck. So it's that whole, for me, it's very much the notion of if you keep your individual parts well and healthy, and accept that there will be times when they're not quite so healthy, but then the whole organism works together to, in the short term, hopefully, compensate. But then when things are improved, then that balance is, it might look slightly different, but it is retained. So it is acknowledging, listening, really hearing, and really looking after for me.
There's kind of two things for me that are coming up as you say that. One is about like something like right relationship, like and I was thinking about sort of beyond the organism. If we use that metaphor of an organization as an organism, like what's its right relationship to what's around it? And like Jennifer said, sometimes that could be death, or sometimes that could be transformation, or sometimes that could be, those two will do for now, right? But what's the right relationship? And I think that's a big question in our sector right now. And whether you're, the more power your organization and you have in our sector, the more you need to be asking that question. But it's a question for all of us, like, how are we relating to the people who our work is designed, intended to support, help, fund, whatever those things are. And so the idea of an organism helps me to think about that, because I think sort of in the kind of natural state, like organisms aren't all the same, but there's a kind of way that they relate and they have a role in an ecosystem. And then the other thing that it reminded me of was last year when Roshni interviewed Gargan Seth, and I may be saying his name wrong, and he gave that metaphor of the termites, how the termites, whatever they are, ants or termites, that build these incredible structures, and they can't, they don't know what they're building, that it's like, you don't necessarily have to see the whole picture. And that's tough for me because I'm like a real big picture person. I want to know the big picture. And actually, we don't always. And so like, we don't always need to know that. And for those that didn't hear that conversation last year, that thing of, he used this metaphor for sort of civil society needs to be more like termites building these structures where they all work together to build something, and they don't necessarily know exactly what they're building, but they all do their little piece, right? So those are the things that came to me. Yeah.
Thanks, Marianne. I just want to pause and welcome those who've joined recently who may not know what's happening here. I'm going to take a break and invite them back in. These spotlighted 4 squares you see before you are, think of them as seats. And if you want to have one of those seats and join this conversation, that's what we are celebrating and hoping for. If you want to join in the conversation, just write into the chat, tap, like you're tapping one of us on the shoulder, and we will exchange our spotlight with you. And I'm going to bow out now. There's a couple of people.
Seen a tap. I was just going to say, I've seen a tap.
Thanks all. Welcome, Tanya.
Hey, Tanya.
Thank you. Oh, this feels exciting and a bit scary. I'm daring to be unprepared. I was really loving the evolution of your sharing and the ideas that you were sharing in relation to termites and the process of creation that wasn't necessarily seen from a particular perspective. It was much more about a kind of spontaneous co-creation, as opposed to something that was maybe carefully designed or structured or led. I'm a gardener. I try and live on the food that I grow in my garden. And I'm really interested in, and for the last several years have been discovering permaculture gardening. And your discussion was bringing to mind some of the things that I've been learning on that journey that I think also really apply for me in my relationship to my work with colleagues in Myanmar. I work a lot with colleagues in the international sector and peace building sector in Myanmar. One thing that my garden has really taught me, and my relationship with this work has really taught me, is the amount that I do not control. Do not control so many things. And I guess I learned that I did control stuff. I kind of have this story, or that I can if I do it well enough, or structure it well enough. And my garden and my work has really taught me that I can invite things. I can come with an intention or with an opening to something. And then a lot of the time, nature in my garden and a whole bunch of different factors in my work with my colleagues and with community members in Myanmar means that something else grows. Sometimes it's a different plant, or it's something in a different place, or it's a kind of an emptiness that is actually creating something else, even though it looks like I wasn't imagining, but it's a creative emptiness. So I'm really learning to appreciate that, that there are so many things that I do not control, and being joyful with that, because it's very much a process of discovery for me in that way. And the other part of that is that the discovery for me is this place for awe. That's often that what comes is so much more, or is so much more complicated than what I had anticipated. And I celebrate that. Those were my thoughts from your conversation.
I'm so excited there's another gardener on here who gets, just also a gardener. And I think as you were sharing, Tanya, I was thinking, I moved to Accra last year, and I love to garden, and I took some tomato seeds and some chili seeds. This is probably highly illegal, and I shouldn't be transporting seeds across international borders, but too late. And I have always grown tomatoes, particularly here in London, and they've gone wild, and I've had far too many and didn't quite know what to do with them. So I thought I was really good at it. I took the seeds to Accra, planted them, and lots of green stuff grew, but very few tomatoes. And I think what I was most offended, because I thought, but I've done everything that I've always done over there. And for me, sort of, being in the development sector, it just said to me, I've always been interested in this idea of replication. And it worked here, so why don't we take the lessons from there and just do the same there and there and there and there. And these very temperamental tomatoes that behave really well in my back garden in one place were not having it at all in my new place, until a friend of mine came out, gave me a little tip based on something, a thing, let's call it an assumption, because that's the terms that we like to use, that I had completely not considered, because of course I don't know the context. So I think that idea of, gardens doing what gardens will do, but particularly what you said, Tanya, about that control thing, for me, I've re-embraced that fact of let's see what happens. And interestingly, I eat a lot of avocados and plant the seeds, and now I have like 6 avocado trees. So tomatoes was so last year for me, but this whole other thing has become my new obsession and is giving me great joy.
So welcome, Tracy. And my question to all of us listening in an outer circle, how do we practically let go of control? Because that's what's tripping us up in our organizations. We have all the ideological proclamations, we have all the right values, but there's some stuff that's not changing because of our day-to-day choices. So what choices are available to us to, let go of control, maybe?
Thanks, Jennifer. I was, so first of all, I'm not a gardener. I really like gardens, but I'm really hopeless at growing things. I was thinking about, and I think it's linked to control and to choices. I think we have to, if we're going to make different choices, I need to make space for choices. And that means, it doesn't mean that letting go, because if you're only looking for tomatoes, you'll only find tomatoes, right? Or you won't, and then you'll think you've failed. But if I'm just looking, I can see I see things differently, or try a different lens, maybe. So I'm thinking about when I review work, I kind of have an idea about how it should be. And then if it's not like that, I think, oh, what am I going to do about that? Rather than thinking, okay, I've done this. What actually has happened? And what does that look like? And then what choices does that give me? And it's kind of giving up control, but it's also actually giving yourself or myself a different kind of control, because I've opened up the space rather than closing it down, which I think we all have a tendency, especially in our hurry, and we just have to make the space as well. If we're, as Pontso said, going through our to-do list, unless we've got make the space to make different choices down on our to-do list, then we might not find that space.
Love it. Aza, Francois, so wonderful to welcome you both. Feel free to
Greetings to everybody. First of all, just an appreciation to the organizers, because I really love your quite radical searching for new ways to connect and transcend the organizational kind of barriers and norms of dominating ways of communicating. So I'm really I was making notes of some of the expressions you were using, because they're so unusual, those kinds of intentions that you're setting out. I have to say that several people have talked about letting go of control or seeking and not to be in control. But I think it really does depend on our positioning in the social and political world that we are in. So I've grown up in the UK, and I've always been in white dominant spaces as the only person of colour very often, whether that was school, college, university, in my teaching role in community education, university education. And I've really had to fight against the institutional assumptions, which were all about marginalizing everybody else who's not white and male, in a sense. So I'm not going to go into the details of those kinds of things, but that I think I have to refer to the poem that that Jennifer began with, and I found that quite jarring in some ways, because it was bringing together kind of the two words killing and oppressing, and we, and I did find that quite difficult to be with, because I think there's a trend in many kind of alternative spaces to move towards recognizing 400-500 years of oppression, and the ways in which indigenous ways of thinking and being have been erased by white dominant systems of thinking, which is very, very much needed. But I think it's I think I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but so as an example, we hear now more and more people, more and more voices saying climate change, how bad is China and India for contributing to the CO2 situation. So the countries that have been dominated for centuries and exploited for centuries are now kind of getting scapegoated in this conversation about attributing responsibility. And so to put it on a personal level, I've just started a course and a master's degree in creative writing. And I'm so disappointed because having spent a year and a half away from institutional structures by and large, because of the COVID pandemic, I had the opportunity to read a lot of recent books by people of color, which I found really affirming and liberating and fascinating, and it reminded me of how the history books that I was taught from school days onwards have really erased the truth of how genocidal actions have led to the so-called development of the Western world. And I really do not like terms like the underdeveloped world or the developing world. I think it's much more appropriate to say the super exploited world, to define the reasons why countries that were perfectly self-sufficient we all know this, so I'm not going to go into the details of that. But I'm just on a personal level, because I'm wanting to speak from just yesterday, I decided to leave the master's degree in creative writing because just about 95 to 98% of the reading list is white males with a few kind of nods in the direction of a few female writers, and I'm just tired of always my consciousness must be occupied with the concerns and vantage point of the majority culture within the Western world. So the kind of elites of the West who have the time and space to write and pontificate on the world and their sufferings within it. And so it just feels really, there's still very few spaces, such as the space that you're creating, where people who've been historically into the present day and in all these institutional structures. I mean, I didn't expect to have to yet again be the lone voice that says, oh, can we not have a Nobel Prize winner like Toni Morrison? You know, so even though there are so many outstanding and amazing writers from all around the globe, they're still being excluded on this master's degree. And so it's like a constant battle, and I decided I didn't want to be that lone voice battling yet again. I think I'll stop there.
That's really truly why Healing Solidarity exists, because we know that we are up against really tough structures. And what happens in oppressive systems is that we feel we're isolated and alone. What we want to create at Healing Solidarity is the place where we know that we're not the only ones, and that you have allies and and you have people who are thinking the way you are thinking, who are thinking about how do we create new kinds of spaces and make space for new choices. That's why we're here. So thank you for offering that reflection. I want to also turn to Francois, who's actively making different choices.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. I think thank you for this format and this conversation. I think it's really interesting. And I think as you were asking the question, how do we do things differently, and especially related to control? And if we take in the point that Pontso was making about organizations also being organisms, I think in the past year or so, since I've been like in a position to really think about doing things differently, the question that came to me is, because it's an organism, it has to be something collective. Like one person, regardless of this person's positioning in that organism, the choice of making things differently cannot be an individual choice. So that's why, though I think it's a really, at a very personal level, the question of giving up control, I think it's personally very relevant to me. But when I think about the organization I now lead, there's an expectation that, you know, somebody has to be in control, right? So there might be this push for sharing control, sharing, you know, but I think there's even the shift to get people feeling confident. And I'm not using empowered. I'm using confident. I'm using I don't know what the words are, but about sharing control cannot only be done if people you are trying to share it with are also trying to do things differently. So I think it's a chicken and egg situation there where, you know, like it had to start somewhere, but it also has to, I don't know, I just wanted to offer that because I think some of these conversations are useful for us as individual members of an individual organ in the organism. But I think that relationship also makes those issues and those questions a bit more, I don't know, complex, I've found. And so I just wanted to add it to the question that maybe as we all think about it, that we also can think about what is individual and what is collective in this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Some of us in white bodies have to unlearn a lot for that to happen. And so we want to acknowledge that our sector still doesn't look, it's not about optics. It's not even about optics, right? It's about the fundamental ways we are able to come together to share power. And when we think of the organism as a collective entity, it changes everything. In hierarchical institutions, which are a representation of oppressive systems, someone is always, unless you're at the top, you're subordinate, meaning, you know, you have to get more power to succeed, right? So it commodifies information. And to actually acknowledge that we're all bringing something different to the table, where decisions are made and where we're not erasing hierarchy, that there still has to be leadership. But what does leadership look like when it's not trying to hoard power and information? That's what we need to be able to describe more and demonstrate more in our sector, in my point of view. So thank you for bringing that. And to really acknowledge that this skill set to be in collective, to share power, is old technology. It's not It's really available. You know, like we don't have to like think new thoughts about how to do this better. We can do it. We can actually look to the people who hold that wisdom and knowledge and create from there. How much do you feel like is the balance between abandoning the old ways, like this tension you described this, to me, there's a tension that we have to continually navigate in the chicken and egg thing, which is how much do we tear it down, burn it down? How much do we reimagine something completely different? Some of us in this call listening in are part of very big behemoth institutions that are hard to shift. Some of us sit in organizations that have a lot more facility. How are you all kind of relating to that tension? And I'd love to hear from others. Please feel free to tap in and tell us how hard it is to actually be part of those bigger institutions sometimes. Thanks, Swati. Come in.
Hey, so I think that's a really welcome question to come in. I would say it's extremely hard to show up, and not just to show up, to actually feel like you're showing up authentically when you're in huge systems. I consider myself, you know, someone who's I'm an advisory circle member of Healing Solidarity, and obviously really close to a lot of the progressive sides of philanthropy. But I also find myself in a brown body that is young, that is invited to be part of boards. And so I sit on a number of different philanthropic boards, which is exactly where people like me should be. And actually, it shouldn't really be me. I still come from the global north, even though I occupy a brown body. And I would actually prefer that young adolescent girls who are my sort of biggest teachers are actually given those spaces, and are coming from the global south and don't have to be extremely articulate in English to be able to occupy that space. But I would say that even I feel like a fish out of water in some of the meetings that I'm in quite often. And I have to say that some of my biggest teachers are other people of color who are in those spaces and have been in them before me. Pontso, who's also an advisory circle member, is on a board with me. And, you know, it's so important to have that solidarity there to even get your footing, to be able to utilize any positional power that you might have and find your voice in a place like that. But I think that when that community doesn't exist, it's really hard to carve that out. And so there's something about recognizing the lineage of who has made that space available for you to walk into, and what more you need to do to push to allow for a younger for younger or newer voices to come into that space. But it is extremely hard. You know, you are battling with systems that are constantly questioning your motives, your new reframing, your questioning of different systems and behaviors. And as much as we all want to say, you know, that we need to upend the monitoring and evaluation frameworks, we need to look at impact differently, I absolutely believe that. But sometimes you get backed into corners in these spaces and you're given such limited time to be able to substantiate your voice, the wisdom of so many communities around you, and you feel actually a great sense of disservice to the movements that you're a part of, that you weren't able to represent them in that second that you were given to be responsive. And so I think that there is a lot of there is something about how do we build that collective power and that energy in the space, which is why I think, you know, in any space there's this sort of, let's just pluck off some really great leaders, let's pluck off the brilliant speakers, the people that everyone's going to turn to. And we all know that as amazing as those individuals are, they cannot do something in isolation. You know, we've seen it before. You know, is it optics, or is it just the sense that actually that person is the only, they might be the CEO, they might be the president, they might be on the board, but if they're alone, it's actually very difficult to navigate and operate with that power. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But I actually think community needs to be there, which is why all of us want this, the face of our spaces to change, to be much more representative of who's in the room, who's there, what's going on. And I just feel really committed to that. I don't think that individuals can make the change that we're really looking for. I think it's really hard to put that pressure on it. And, you know, we talk about feminist solidarity, and you know, feminist solidarity, feminist principles that we have is about being there together, to having multiple voices in that space, to have that solidarity in the spaces and not be sort of the only bastion. And so, yeah, for me, I find it very difficult because I have this incredible privilege and incredible gratitude to be in the spaces that I'm in, but sometimes this complete lack of feeling quite inauthentic, questioning my own value in the space when I'm not able to do what I've set out to do and I believe really deeply in. And also just acknowledging that that can only be built with collective power as well. And actually, how much is the balance of pushing forward and how much is it about trying to bring more people with you on this journey and into this space?
Swati, I remember once you telling me, I don't know who it was, but I remember you telling me that the head of a team or an organization would text, she would have a text thread with all of the people who reported to her, so that when she entered into those rougher spaces, she would literally like, which is what I often would do on Twitter, but that was a way of, also, what I thought was so powerful about that was that she was also sharing the experience of what it was to be in that room in a way that helped them all hold her in there.
Yeah. So that was, I remember who that was from. So that was from Zora at Mama Cash. So she is the executive director of Mama Cash, the International Women's Fund. And it was a conversation that we had actually as part of Healing Solidarity a couple of years ago. And I think what was interesting is she said, you know, that she is in often rooms with lots of people who don't look like her, who don't have the same identity or, you know, identity politics, but also the representation that she has. And one of the things that she would do was call on others to bear witness to the fact that she was in that space, but also when she would report back to her team, because I think that's the other thing is, and I don't want to, you know, I'm obviously speaking from a very privileged position of having positional power in the sector, and I totally like recognize that. I'm a consultant at the moment, so I have no positional power in that sense, but I did. But I think from that perspective, there's also this sort of pressure that's put on like the single leaders who are in black or brown bodies to be everything to everyone. And one of the things that she said as part of that was that when she went back to her team in Mama Cash, she would say how many people were in the room and how many people occupied different bodies. And oftentimes it would be like, I was in a room with, you know, 100 people, 99% were white men. And so it gives you a sense of bearing witness to what different people are doing in the space and the kind of pushback that they also feel occupying the bodies that they're in, as well as the position that you might have entered that space with. So yeah, I think that there is something about how do you call in your community to support and cheerlead at the sidelines, but also how do you feed back to the community and others that you work with to actually bear witness to you know what many of us go through. And I don't think this is just a leadership thing. I think all of us find ourselves in spaces like that, particularly when you occupy bodies like mine. So yeah, I would add absolutely to that.
Ask people to bear witness. Yeah. You are part of a whole. Yeah, that's fun. I see you.
Yeah, thank you, Swati. It's really, I think I completely share your point about community and the fact that the very fact that we are able to be in any room is because somebody before us I pushed the door a little, it's just a little bit wider, so we could step in. I do find, in addition to that, that even when we manage to find rooms where there's a few more of us, I think there's a responsibility that we need to take collectively of making sure that we have time to join like our heads together and say, what do we want to do with this space? Or just like, what have you learned before? That, and I think that effort, so you, Jennifer, you're inviting us to speak as I, not we. So I'm gonna say this for me, like I'm 35 for a few more days. And I was hired to be the CEO of an organization that is like 21 years old. I was terrified. And the one thing I knew to do was recognizing that there's a bunch of people who've done this stuff before me. And I knew who they were. I didn't always have access to them beyond knowing their names and having met them. And it took me the kind of courage I usually don't have to reach out and say, I'm sorry, I know I don't know you. I really need 20 minutes of your time because I'm freaking out. So I needed to be like completely freaked out to take the courage to ask those questions. And they gave me the best advice. Everything that I've learned that's been the most useful have been from having those conversations. But what about somebody who has less access, less courage, less desperation, less, you know, like that's those spaces for us to be able to share what we know and to strategize together, to learn together. I think that's also for me making different choices, like investing in the time when we pack our agendas for our meetings, you know, on technical stuff. Like how do we make sure we make time for that? Also, is something that I would also bring in.
Oh yeah, this packed agenda thing is like, it feels like we're addicted to it. You know, I think Pontso even used the word earlier of, I have to write it down. The habit to be busy. The habit to be busy doesn't come from us. It comes from a capitalist system that we're all a part of. So how do we revalue other parts of ourselves that are not just the productive parts, right?
I feel like Jennifer might be a little bit frozen. I don't know if she is for everyone else, but in a beautiful smiling position. Yeah, I would vibe off that. I think that there is so, I feel also that because of COVID, you know, most of our work has gone online, which obviously has so many benefits to our work, you know, being able to be around and caregive to those that we love, to be able to not do horrible commutes, to be wearing our pajamas, you know, like waist down from here, and so on and so forth. But actually it sort of crept into making us always available and always needing to be on, and sort of at the moments where you would normally leave the office and maybe decompress and stop, when you stop a meeting, you sort of are still wondering about you're still wondering about, should I be doing something that's more productive now? Should I be working a little bit more now? I could just do this. I could just hop on and do that. I'm already at my computer. It will take me 5 minutes and then you're there for another 50 or another hour. So yeah, I do think that we need to be making much more time for joyous space. And I think one of the things that I'm also really recognizing is that when people are meeting online in our workspaces, instead of sort of building community and having very spacious and open conversations, they kind of always have to have an agenda and an outcome. Like we're not connecting necessarily with each other on that deeper level. or just that chit chat, that you would have with colleagues to really understand and digress on politics or what's happening. I work in the gender justice space, and just a couple of weeks ago, you had the tremendous win in Mexico, and then you had like an awful rollback in Texas at the same time. And I don't think that in many of the spaces I was in, people had the chance to actually just talk about how that had landed, how people were feeling in their bodies, how people were reacting to stuff, because it wasn't scheduled in to our crazy Zoom cycles. And we don't even, it's not that we're just not able to connect, we're not able to reflect together, we're not able to talk about the traumas of the work that connect us and drive us and propel us. And I think that that is very, very difficult.
Thank you, Swati. I think, it feels almost in that kind of way that seasons and cycles happen, that what you've just shared really resonated with me when we started this conversation today. That sense of being really deliberate about acknowledging, and to acknowledge you need to be purposeful around listening and healing and hearing and understanding. And I think, we talk about recognizing and celebrating the wins more. So you have Mexico, but also recognizing and processing when things don't go the way that you might want, and not allowing yourself the time to process, I think, is one of the things that I want to get better at. It's not always about, okay, well, that didn't go the way I wanted, so let me start or take another tactic or whatever. It's really understanding, and very much understanding so that we can do things differently. I know that there's that saying about, doing the same thing the same way a number of times is a definition of whatever. So I think it is that thing, we need to listen to ourselves more and listen to each other more, and in different ways that help us to be much more meaningfully connected.
I'm reminded, Marianne referred to Gagan Sethi earlier, and he's been one of my mentors. I'm reminded, Pontso, when you speak of something he said, he gave me, I was, in a difficult situation where nothing seemed to be going right, and always looking for solutions, right? Like, how can I fix this? Then can I fix that? And then what happens? Cause and effect, very much in a positivist space. And I turned to him for advice, and he actually said just one line to me. He said, all I want you to do is find a way to get your breathing back to normal, and you will find out what to do. And at that point I was like, you can't be saying this. I've come to you with all these expectations that you're going to like fix these issues. But then I went back and I actually worked on that. Whatever worked for me at that point of time, it was meditation, it was going out more. But I think when somehow I brought that breathing back to normal, it was less of busyness, less of needing to control, less of comparison, and just really rooting myself in who I am and what I am able to do. I think that's when that flow came much more naturally. And how we can keep going back to that point, I think, is something that, it's a challenge. But I think once we can get back to that space of who we are, where our intuitions are the strongest, we are feeling like we don't have to play act or, be something that we don't want to be. We're comfortable in our skin. I think creating that space in our organizations is, I think, paramount. And, that breathing back to normal, it always just has stayed with me.
Oh, comfortable in our own skin. Thank you. What a wonderful idea to leave us with. We did that on purpose. My Zoom freeze was all about allowing my colleagues to jump in and demonstrate that it's not just about me, it's about us. and we can actually share responsibilities and change roles based on the moment. That's the capacity we're trying to build within our organizations at this time, to because if you haven't noticed, the world's changing fast. And how are we going to be able to make different choices that build collective power? I really appreciate that additional framing that we're bringing into this space to let this theme carry on and build out throughout the week. So the in-between conversations that you've been a part of, I really thank you all for joining with us, for staying with us. We had people stay the whole time, which is, to me, always a good marker of a juicy conversation. These sessions are going to weave throughout the week. We're going to take what we talked today and we're going to offer it up into a space with some conversation catalysts who all identify as activists in the global South. Tomorrow, day 3, we'll take it to funders. Day 4, we're going to have an amazing intergenerational conversation where we think about how do we look at this through that lens. And then on Friday, we're going to come back together as the Healing Solidarity team and reflect on, did the experiment work? Like, what did we learn? What themes, ideas, insights emerged? Did we create the right kinds of conditions for people to really talk about the practicalities of the changes we need to make in the day-to-day, in the ways of working together? So I just want to thank all of the conversation catalysts, my sisters in Healing Solidarity, as well as Tanya and Tracy and Aza and Francois and Swati. I hope that's everyone. I mean, if I missed you, I love you. Please don't take it. But I'm just so grateful that you all took the leap. We're willing to say what you wanted to say into this, because that's the kind of spaces where we are intending, and we are really, really grateful for your small courage today, so that we can have big courage together. Yeah, thank you all so much. I'm going to put into the chat to remind us all that Healing Solidarity is member supported. If you can help sustain our work as well as this conference, we're very grateful and very indebted to you all. Please keep coming back. It's always going to be this juicy, we hope. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.